Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Art of Slowing Down podcast. It's your host here, Analena, and today I'm very excited to have a special guest that I also meet for the very first time. His name is Kute Blackson. And before I read your bio, I just want to give you a warm welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna share a little bit about him and then we're gonna take it away. So Kute Blackson is a beloved inspirational speaker and transformational teacher. He speaks at countless events. He organizes around the world as well as at outside events, including the A-Fast. That's from Mind Valley, I believe. Very awesome. Young Presidents Organization and Entrepreneurs Organization. And he's also a member of the Transformational Leadership Council, a select group of 100 of the world's foremost authorities in the personal development industry. He's the winner of the 2019 Unity New Thought Walden Award, and Blackson is widely considered a next generation leader in the field of personal development. And his mission is very simple, which I absolutely love. It's to awaken and inspire people around the planet to access inner freedom, live authentically, and fulfill their true life's purpose. And that's really what this podcast is all about as well. And I know you're also an expert on the topic of surrender. So I'm curious, how did you get into all of this?
Wow, that's a big question. That could be the podcast in and of itself, but in a nutshell, in a certain way, I was born into it. In a certain way, it's been my whole life. For me, I'm not someone that, read The Secret 2 years ago and became a life coach. Watched a few YouTube videos, became a life coach. For me, it's been in my blood from the moment I was born. I had a bit of an unusual childhood in that, but I didn't think it was unusual. I just thought my childhood was like everyone's. In that, like my first memories as a young boy, I remember being around age 6, age 7, seeing a crippled woman crawling on the floor. She picks up the sand that this man walks on, wipes it on her face, and stood up. You could call that a miracle. And so week after week, I grew up seeing miracles, blind people seeing and deaf people hearing. The same man whose hand she picked up would look at a person in a wheelchair and say, "Why are you in this wheelchair? Stand up, you're not sick." And he would touch them and they would stand. Or somebody would come in with crutches and he would say, "Hey, why do you have these crutches? Like, throw your crutches away. Do you believe in the power of the, of the divine?" And they would say, "Yes." And he would say, "Well, then throw your crutches away." So this man was my father. He built 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa, a huge church in London, 5,000 people every Sunday, which is where I grew up. He was a very mystical man, a very spiritual man, a very metaphysical man. I call him an African yogi, an African siddha. Even though he had these churches, he ended up going to these and having a kind of enlightenment experience. And so I grew up in this very unusual environment. My father's from Ghana. My mother's Japanese. So I grew up, she grew up Buddhist. So I grew up meditating with my mother, going to church with my father.
How cool is that? That's
super
awesome.
cool, super cool. And so it's all I knew as a kid. It's all I knew. And this was my reality. So when I was age 8, I started speaking in my father's churches, and that began my speaking career. And when I was 14, I was ordained as a minister in my father's church. And I was announced as the successor to my father. And I was designated to be his successor and take over his organization. I was the guy. And everybody was happy but me, because I knew that this was not my path. I knew that this was not my destiny, but I think I was too afraid to speak my truth. My fear was, if I really dared to tell my father and everyone how I really felt, which was, this is not my path. My fear was I'd be alone, I'd be outcast. And I think, like many of us, we allow fear to hijack our voice. We allow fear to limit our expression. We allow fear to stop us from being who we really are. And so for 4 years, I said nothing, and I tried to fit myself into being who I thought the world wanted me to be. And I became miserable in the process. And so when I turned 18, 17 and a half, 18, I had a vision. And that vision was to come to America. Why America? Why specifically California? Is because this is where all of the self-help authors seem to live. And as a young boy, I would sneak into my father's office, and on his bookshelf, he had 1,000 books. And all of these books from the Eastern mystics, but the Western folks, Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, they all lived in LA. They all lived in San Diego. And so I wanted to go into this field. And I think sometimes it was as though my soul called me so strongly. And I think sometimes when your soul calls you and guides you, it often doesn't make sense to your mind. It often doesn't make sense to your logic.
Yeah.
Um, it's often not convenient. But what I have found through my own lived experience is that when you follow your soul, you will always end up in the right place at the right time with the right people doing the right thing, even though the path that you take may not be the
Mm.
one that you most expect. And so in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I looked into my future and I saw that I could follow the expected path and take over my father's organization. But if I didn't have myself, if I didn't have my soul, if I didn't have my integrity, what the hell do I have? Right. And
Yeah.
and so that's when I realized I have to leave. That's when I realized I need to speak to my father, renounce everything, leave everything that I know behind, which was terrifying. And told my father we didn't speak for 2 years. Long story short, I ended up winning a green card in the green card lottery.
Oh, it
And
was meant to be.
that's what enabled me to come to America. 18 years old, $800 in my
Mm.
pocket, came to
Yeah.
America with 2 suitcases, knew nobody, and just landed in Los Angeles. And that began my journey as a young man.
Mm-hmm.
Went and found many
Mm-hmm.
of the teachers and the mentors that I read about, studied with some of them. Longer
Nice.
story short, ended up going to walk the Camino in northern Spain and traveling to Israel, ended up in India. And for me, it was my time in India that, let's say, awakened me to something deeper in myself, a deeper truth, a deeper sense of who I am, a deeper sense of my purpose. And that's what inspired me to come back to LA again. And 20 some years ago, I began coaching people before coaching was popular, before the internet, and coaching people one on one. And that
Mm-hmm.
began my journey. And one person came, another person came. I kind of developed my own way of working with people. And small groups, large groups, larger groups, 2 books, and here we are. That's the short version.
Wow, very inspiring. You know what connection I made in my mind? Because there's another story that's it's a totally different area of work, but you know
Mm.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, I can imagine,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah.
So I don't
I
know if you
love him.
watched, yeah, he's awesome. And he also obviously lives in California, probably
Yeah.
still today.
In
So
LA. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And he had a documentary, actually did a podcast episode about him a little while ago. And he, the Arnold documentary, right? And he told the story just like you. I had this vision. I wanted to go to America because he was from Austria. He was also, I mean, mainly in
Wow.
Europe, also in Germany. And he had this thing like, I wanted to go to America. And he made it happen, obviously. And he also ended up in LA, right? So,
Mhm.
and he always talked about, I had this vision. I had this, was his soul craving. He just knew. And when you just know, so when you were talking, it was like, yeah, it's the very similar determined energy, like where you
Yeah.
cannot not listen to yourself, where you just have
Yes.
such
I
a,
felt like I didn't have a choice.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So beautiful that you also ended up at the same kind of area in the world. And
Yes.
obviously he is a different industry, right? He's a bodybuilder and then film
Yeah.
industry, became the governor, and you're all into
Yeah.
the spiritual work. And so thank you for sharing that. Also your story, because I mean the story of your father is kind of what we have stories from Jesus, right? These like healing
Yeah.
things. And like you say, for you this was normal. For me and Alena, listen to this, like this would be crazy growing up, right? This is
Yeah.
definitely not
And people thought I was
normal.
crazy. My teachers thought I was crazy. People didn't believe me. One time, my teacher
Yeah.
came to my father's church in Wandsworth, South London, thinking I was crazy, and she saw healings happening like
Yeah.
all day long. Couldn't believe it. But this is
Yeah.
this is how I grew up. I think for me it was a blessing thinking it was normal
Yeah.
because I didn't think it was a big deal. So for me, it was just my normal reality. Like, of course, miracles can happen. Of course,
Yeah.
we can heal ourselves. Of course, right? And
Yeah.
and so I think it was a blessing not having it be this big deal.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the biggest gift ever because we know the power of belief, right? We're always,
Yes.
there's books
Yes.
about it and books about it. And yeah, we can do positive thinking, we can do affirmations, but if you don't believe it, right, it's not going
Yes.
to manifest. So
Yes.
to believe that you have the power to create your destiny, you have the power to heal, absolutely, what a gift. So
Yes.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have written 2 books, I believe.
Two
Is that
books.
correct?
Yes. Yes. Two best-selling
So
books.
tell me all about it.
What do you want to know? I mean, The Magic of Surrender is my latest book.
Yeah,
And this is a book I'm really passionate about if you
yeah.
want to
I
dive
think
into that.
it's funny because just to give you a little bit of a background about myself or this podcast. So this podcast is called The Art of Slowing Down, right? I
Ah, I
actually
love
talk,
it.
yeah, I talk a lot about surrender and how we actually need to slow down first so we can take aligned action because we live in this world where everything is like forced, forced,
Fast.
forced, right? And my sole purpose led me to something called human design, which I know it's not
Yeah.
something
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
we're going to talk about today, but it's a spiritual tool that helps us
Yes.
connect to
Yes.
ourselves. And
Love it.
everything you talk about, right? Connecting to your soul purpose, getting out of the head and getting into the body, it, I'm talking about all these things all the time. It's just from a different perspective, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's also always such a great reminder for my listeners. Human design is one of the tools that can help you with that,
Yes. I
but it's
love it.
not needed, right? It's like
Yes.
you're on a very, very similar path. So everything you say, like 100% resonates in my body. I'm like, yes, yes,
Mm,
yes, right?
mm, mm.
But it's just from a whole different growing up and what you were used to, you know? And there's so many different access points, I think, and
Yes.
luckily that we have access to these days, how we can connect to our true purpose and fulfillment. And
Mhm,
so I think the word surrender, right?
mhm.
And also, I love to talk about magic. I actually had a course that was called The Art of Managing Magic. So I'll use the word magic all the time. That's why I also love the magic of surrender. But the word itself,
Which one? Surrender or magic?
yes,
Surrender.
well, surrender in this context, I think it can be so easily misunderstood sometimes to giving up
Yeah.
or not taking action. So I would love for you to
Yeah. Let's talk about
elaborate.
it. Yeah, I
Just,
think there's so many misconceptions about the words. Well, first I would say The Magic of Surrender is not the book I wanted to write. The
mm-hmm,
Magic of Surrender is not the book I thought I was going to write
mm,
because of all these misconceptions. It's kind of like when we know on the spiritual path that we kind of should surrender, but it's like going to the dentist and we don't want to go, but we know we have to go. And so I think there's this resistance of truly surrendering. And it's really the ego resistance because for the ego, which we can get into, surrender feels like a death. And so I remember sitting down and writing probably 75 different titles for books and topics of books I thought would be bestsellers, books I thought
mm,
my publisher would want, books I thought my audience would want. And the truth is, if I was honest with myself, of those felt authentic. They just felt
yeah,
like gimmicks, They felt like
yeah,
nice marketing ideas that would, be
mm,
interesting. But none of those felt like aligned for me, like this is it. The only word that I looked at on this whiteboard that felt true was the word surrender. And that's when I thought to myself, oh shit, that's the energy. That's what's calling you. That's the book. So I
mm,
had to surrender to the book about surrender. And I could feel where the energy was. Like when I slowed down and got out of my mind and just allowed myself to feel what was so, not what I
mm,
wanted to be so.
yeah,
I could feel the surrender topic pulling me. And that's when I thought that this is the book that is seeking to happen. Not necessarily the book I want to write, but the book that
yeah,
is seeking to be birthed. So when I surrendered to that, everything unfolded. And so there's so many misconceptions about surrender. This idea that, as you mentioned, surrender is weak, surrender is passive, surrender is giving up, it's waving the white flag, surrender is being taken advantage of, means you're going to be a doormat, means you won't manifest your goals, dreams, and desires. You're going to get manifest less in life. And I'm actually saying no. If you really understand the real essence of true, authentic surrender, what if you didn't get less, but you got more than you could have planned, more than you could
yeah,
have intended, more than you could have visualized with the limitation of your own human sort of limited ego. Maybe not what you thought, but what if it was better? And if we really look at the best things in our life that happen, the best things, most of it we didn't plan. I think most of it happened in the process of living life. Like, I think very few of us said, yeah, today, 2 p.m., I'm going to go to the coffee shop, Starbucks, and then boom, I'm going to meet my soulmate. It happened in such
yeah,
a unexpected way. It's just life. And so
Yeah.
for me, I believe that through my own experience, that surrender is the most powerful thing that we can do. Surrender is the real secret to manifestation. Surrender. The real password to freedom. Surrender. And so when we say surrender, we're talking about a letting go of control, or I should say the illusion that we're in control. I think
Yeah.
control is a master addiction. Surrender is when we stop trying to force and manipulate life to fit our limited idea of what we think it should be. When we stop trying to force ourselves to be, even in human design, right? When you try to force yourself to be someone you think you should be, but
Yeah.
it's not in alignment with your true, authentic nature, right? But if you're not working in alignment with your true nature because you've seen someone on TV, or you've seen Schwarzenegger, or you've seen Kute, or you've seen, someone on social media, and now you're trying to be them, you're not going to be in the flow. And so surrender is when you stop trying to force yourself or life to fit some limited idea of how you think you should be, how you think life should be, so that you can be available and open. It's a taking the limitations off of life so that you can be available, open, receptive, curious, to allow the most authentic expression of life to emerge through you and unfold. And so the old paradigm, I call it the ego-based model for creating life. Nothing wrong with it. It's just limited when you create from the ego, because the ego is limited to the past, which is all about know what you want, get clear on what you want, go make it happen. It's
Exactly.
great. Yeah, what do I want? The question is, what do I want? What do I want? And I think sometimes you get what you do achieve sometimes what you thought you wanted, but many times you realize that what you thought you wanted was just what you thought you wanted based on who you thought you were, wasn't authentically who you were, right? And so many times our goals can be projections of who we think we are, which is a misperception, or unmet needs from childhood. And so for me, what I'm saying also in terms of surrender is a different question. It's a different pathway. It's a different way of living, which is living in harmony with your true nature, which is asking a different question. And the question becomes, what is it that life is seeking to manifest through me? What is it that the universe is seeking to manifest? What is the divine, God, the infinite intelligence? What is my soul seeking to express through me? And what is the deepest truth, the deepest impulse of what is seeking to express? And then you align your personality, your ego, your structure, your marketing, your money, your goal setting in alignment with nature, in alignment with this deep, true, authentic impulse and flow. Then you can go into action, giving 100% without being attached to the result. So for me, this is a part of surrender.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. So this is also for me so on point, because I teach, I talk, I embody for the most part. I think I'm still struggling with it sometimes, to be honest, because I always get into this whole surrender. And I like you said, I'm here to let the divine will flow through me. It's like I'm a vessel for it, right? I'm here to allow that to be executed through the body that I'm birthed in, right? But then I have to be honest, I still catch myself when there's a book about manifestation, or there's a person like, you need to know, always this thing drives me crazy. There's like, you need to know what you want, right? And I have also spent a lot of time with that question, because what you just said was like, exactly, that's what it is. What we want is a conditioned ego for the most part. What we think, or where we like, I need to, especially in the coaching, is always this like, how to make X amount of money, and that never led to anything for myself, because it was coming from ego and not from surrender. And when I, Analena, live the surrender way, the money comes, I feel more fulfilled, I feel more content, everything starts to fall in place, right? But there's always this part of me that's like, well, but I need to do the other thing too, because that's what they're saying, It's very healing for me to hear you speak, because that touches my soul. And I have actually, even on this podcast, I have shared this with people before. So I always, when I talk about it, and I would love to take or hear your take on it. So the way I like to explain it is like, we have a quantum field, right? Of unlimited possibilities. And what we know I think is 1 million, so 1 divided by 2 million%. It's like almost nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
Right? So when we use the mind to what do you want and go after it, we live in a very limited,
Very limited.
like, life. When I surrender, you know, and let life show me.
Yes.
And that's, by the way, what human design is. The big message is here, like, let things come to you and you respond to life. That's
Yes.
what I learned actually
Wow,
through that
nice.
tool. And then when I noticed what feels right in my body, like you were saying, like I had to go to Los Angeles, like I just knew, and my
Yeah.
body was pulling me where I get out of my head into the body. That's when I open myself up to the 99.99999% of the quantum field that's available to us. That's how we grow. That's how we expand. That's how we create new things. But I have to say, I kept questioning my theory about this. So
Yes.
thank you for bringing me back to my truth.
Yes.
Because I catch myself over and over because there's still so much. I think Eckhart Tolle also calls it ego manifestation versus conscious manifestation, right?
So much.
He talks about
Because even, see, here's the thing. The sneakiest place, and I love that you're being so honest about it. It's so beautiful because the sneakiest place that ego hides is in spirituality. And so then the ego wants to, and this is why all of the books about manifestation that are wrapped around indulging the ego tend to do well, because when egos read like, oh, I am the doer, that I'm the one that's going to make it happen, and I'm the one that's going to be creating everything in my life, the ego loves that shit, because the ego now feels safe, because now if I'm going to do more, I have a sense of, then the ego feels like it is reinforced, and the ego gets reinforced by doing more. So the ego tends to love the theories of manifestation where it is doing more. But even if you look at Jesus, and this is not a religious conversation, to me, Jesus as a enlightened master and one of many enlightened masters, he was a miracle worker, and he gave us a code. He gave us the code. Here's a guy that turned water into wine, fed 5,000 people. And Jesus said something like, it's not limited individual, Aline Kute, that does the work. He never said, look at me. I have this whole business plan as to how I'm going to turn the water into wine. He's like, it's not I that does the work. It's the Father that does the work through me, the Father, consciousness, the Divine Mother, whatever label you want to put. It is life, this field of life that does the work through me. And so he understood that the more he was able to get himself out of the way, the more life, I and my Father are one. There is no separation. So the more he was able to dissolve that sense of separate self and surrender to that quantumness field of everything that we all are, and at the level we are one, the more life began to live through him. Life began, and I believe that when we surrender, life is what will manifest to us. We are not the one that will manifest. Life will manifest to us. The intelligence will manifest to us. If you look at all of the truly, truly, truly great ones, Buddha, Jesus, Mandela. Like, imagine Mandela sitting around going, yeah, I'm going to make a vision board. I think I'm going to spend 27 years in prison. Then I'm going to come out. That's a good idea. Spend you can't plan that. Like, you can plan making a few $1,000,000, but you can't plan Mandela. You can't plan Gandhi. Like, and so all of these great ones, Jesus, Buddha, Mother Teresa, Mandela, Martin Luther King, right? Many, Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali. I think at some point they reached a point where they surrendered themselves. In that surrender, they transcended their own human limitations. That's when you tap into another dimension of life, the infinite. And that's when you go beyond the ego. And that's when life begins to manifest through you. And that's the magic. But for the ego, our limited sense of Kute, Arlene, John, Susie, its surrender can feel a bit scary, because surrender feels like a death. So it wants to Let me be the one that's doing. Let me be the doer. Let me create struggle. Let me create drama. Let me have all of these strategies and techniques to do so I can feel like I exist, which creates a false sense of separation. But when we say surrender, it can feel a bit scary. But yes, I do. It doesn't mean we sit there and do nothing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But just to be clear, or just what do you mean? You guys say sit there and
We're
just sit
just
on the
doing this,
couch
Ali.
and just man, watch television? No, watch YouTube videos? No. It means you be still. You slow down and you be still and you catch the vision. You feel. You let it come to you. You let it come through you. You feel the deepest impulse. Oh, do it this way, launch this book, write this, launch this business. Once you catch the authentic vision of what is seeking to unfold, then you can go into action and make your plan. If you want to add some strategies of marketing to support the fulfillment that is authentic and true, cool.
Mm-hmm.
But now you are going in a direction that is in alignment with your nature, and everything you add to that is simply supporting the expression of that more than anything, right? And to me, that's the difference. And so it might mean you work hard. It might mean you work 18 hours a day. Gandhi wasn't lazy. Mother Teresa wasn't lazy, but they were working in harmony with the flow of the rhythm of their life and their soul. And so it might mean you have to commit and work hard, or in flow or put some effort, but there's a difference between effort and struggle. So there's a difference too.
Yeah, I love that because I talk a lot about effortlessness.
Mm.
And what I have noticed for myself, when I come from ego, especially like in my business, if I get into the ego state and I'm like, I need to do the strategy, I need to do this because everybody's talking about, my whole body is like, heck no. I get the very clear message, right? And sometimes then I try to tell myself, yeah, but I should use more systems. I should do all these things. But I also know in my core, my being, I'm more of a slow, steady kind of success person. And that
Yes,
feels
yes,
right. That feels
yes.
good to me. That feels sustainable for me. And yet, like I say, I still compare myself sometimes. And I'm like, I should be further along. I should have done this already,
I think part of it is also, really surrendering to your nature, your path.
Yeah,
Right?
your
Your,
path,
your,
exactly.
because I think everyone has their own path. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like if there's three pillars to life, we don't have to get into all of it, but there's three pillars to life. One, we could say, imagine like we draw a line and it's like karma and destiny, right?
Mm-hmm.
As one path. So as souls, we incarnate into the human experience, and we're born into an energetic momentum of a river of karmic flow and destiny based on our
Mm-hmm.
parents, based on our grandparents, based on our ancestors, based on all the stuff they didn't do. We're born into this sort of flow. Like if you're Elon Musk's son, you have a slightly different karmic flow than being born into a favela in Brazil with
Yeah.
$2, right? It's a slightly different karmic destiny. And so we're born into a sort of preset flow of karma and destiny and unfolding. There's a momentum there that is a trajectory that is there with our own lessons to learn of our own
Mm-hmm.
soul's journey, our own things to overcome, family system dynamics, all of these things. Now, that doesn't mean just because you're born into that, you're stuck and frozen and you can't evolve through that. But
Yeah.
there is a certain flow that's there. Now, you could say the next pillar, I think, is something like effort, intention, effort, commitment. And so I think with intention and with some work, right, we can do the inner mental, emotional, spiritual healing. We can also apply ourselves to work so that we can shift our karma, learn the lessons, evolve, heal, transcend our karma in a certain way so that we can evolve and also fulfill some of the gifts that we're given in the destiny pillar, so to speak. I look at someone like Let's take a tennis example. Then if you're
Oh yeah, I
into
love him.
tennis, but you look at like Roger Federer and Nadal, right? They kind of they have a certain natural gift, like a
Mm-hmm.
gift. They just gifted. Federer is gifted, but he also worked hard where he
Yeah,
practiced. But I look at someone like Novak Djokovic. I don't think he's as gifted as Federer and Nadal, but I think he maximized his sort of work ethic, commitment, intention,
he's
practice
definitely,
to
yeah, I
to
happen to
to
know them. Yeah.
right to okay, there you go, to fulfill his naturally given gift. And so I think that we all have a certain momentum and path. Like for me, I was born into a spiritual lineage.
Mm.
When I came to America, I tried to go sell cars because I'm like, well, it
Yeah.
makes money. And I would, you know what? I did it for one weekend, Alina, and I was miserable. It was so not in my nature and
Yeah.
natural flow. It was a complete misery. And so I think we have to understand our nature, understand our unique soul's configuration and our unique soul's lessons for what we are here to learn, because I think all of us, we are here to learn different things in this human experience, in
Mm.
this life university. We all are here to learn different things. And I think when we can understand, oh, what am I here to learn in this life, and have a relationship with that, it can change our relationship to navigating life and
Yeah.
experiences and challenges.
Yeah, I love that. And what you said about the tennis players, for example, right? Like I could have become a tennis player, but I would have probably injured myself. I would have put unnecessary effort into
Yep.
it, right?
Yep.
Or myself, I used to work in corporate and I
Uh-huh.
could have done it, but I was miserable. Like you were miserable with the car
It wasn't
sales.
the
And
flow.
exactly, I wasn't in the flow. I was tired. I felt purposeless. I felt not motivated.
Yeah.
And now with what I'm doing, I really feel, because you mentioned the river. I like to say, like when you are living your purpose, you feel like you're swimming with a current. It's like
There you
life is
go. There
pulling
you
you.
go.
It's like
Yep.
sucking you in.
Yep.
And the synchronicities are showing up left and right. It's like with my podcast, for
It's the
example.
flow.
I knew I was going to birth a podcast 2 years ago. It has, of course, I have shown up every single week. I have done the work.
Done
Some
the
days
work.
I
Yes.
didn't feel like it. But truth to be told, I never have to reach out to people. People always
Yeah.
reach, like even how you
Yeah.
came. I wasn't looking for
Yes.
you. And it's like, this feels aligned. This is awesome. It's what topic we talk
It's
about on
still,
my
yes,
podcast.
it's still in a flow.
Yeah.
It's
It's
still
like,
in a flow. Even when it's hard, or even when it's
yeah.
difficult, even when you don't feel like it, even if you're not in the mood, you're still in the current of the flow.
Exactly, exactly. And the big distinction I was trying to make is like, I don't have to force anything. Yes, there are challenges. Sometimes it feels hard. I feel blah, what I question myself. But exactly the overall energy is like, I'm going with the river, you know?
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I tried when I was a teenager. I was really into soccer. I grew up in London, and I
Oh,
loved
cool.
playing
Wow,
playing
soccer is
football.
huge.
Yeah,
I'm from
huge.
Germany, so we have
There you
lots of
go.
soccer. Yeah.
My favorite German player was Lothar Matthäus.
Yeah,
Lothar
he was cool.
Matthäus. I
Yeah.
loved him, and Jürgen
Yeah.
Klinsmann.
Oh
Love those
yeah, I
guys.
mean doesn't he live in Los Angeles? I mean he was
I think
the
he came to
one
the
you
US. Yeah,
yeah he
yeah,
was
yeah.
the main lead coach
One
of
of
the
the
US
He was
team
the
for a
coach,
while.
yeah. But I
Yeah.
love the Germans. But as a kid, I was obsessed with soccer also, and
Mm-hmm.
and I thought I want maybe I'll be a soccer player, and
Yeah.
I did pretty well. I was captain of my school and started trying out for the
Yeah.
state. But when I went to the state trials, I
Mm-hmm.
played with other kids, and let me tell you, these kids, I was good, but these kids in their sleep were better than me.
Oh,
And
wow.
I realized, shit, they cannot practice and be amazing. And it's gonna take 5 times more practice to even be on their worst day. And even if I forced to become a professional soccer player, maybe I'll be a third division footballer, maybe if I'm lucky. And so that's when I realized
Yeah.
we have to surrender to what our nature is, and max
Mm.
and then fully go all in and surrender to giving 100% to fulfilling the destiny, the karma, the gifts that we have. To me, that's part of
Mm.
surrender too.
Yeah, I love this. And I want to share with you too, because I have learned these things from different things like human design and gene keys and
Mm.
stuff. And there was one thing that was an aha moment for me. So the thing that comes easy to you, I think
Yeah.
you just described that. Like this kid could do it in their sleep. So there was this sense of easiness. And
Yes.
I think we have all grown up with this idea it has to be hard, you
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
I mean, unnecessarily hard foot. I mean, we already talked, we can still work
Yeah.
hard, but be with the flow of a
Yeah.
river.
Struggle.
And I always caught myself when something came very easy to me that I assumed everybody else knows it. For example, this human design,
Mm,
right? I
mm,
can read
mm.
people's chart and they are blown away and like, how do you know all
Wow.
this?
Wow. Wow.
And I had to really remind myself still today. That's why I'm also talking about it right now. Like
Wow. Wow.
most people think this is Chinese for them or like a language they cannot comprehend or and I'm not picking on Chinese here, right? But Chinese for
Yes.
me
Yes.
is
Yes.
difficult. My daughter's actually learning it in school and I cannot
It is
help her.
difficult. It
It's
is
very
difficult.
difficult, right? So, and I teach my clients also all the time, what is the thing that comes easy to you? What is the natural gift you have?
Mhm.
Because I think unconsciously we have this story in our head that, just like you, public speaking comes easy to you. You have done it as a kid, you grew up
Yep.
in the church and did it. Yeah, because you're meant to pour this out into the world
Yes.
without putting unnecessary effort. So that's the
Mhm.
effortlessness that I see that comes from when we surrender to the thing,
Mhm.
you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh,
So what advice or tip would you give to the listeners so that they can tap more into surrender? Because I think getting, out of the head
You
and
know, you
letting go of
know,
the ego is not easy.
yeah, and that is a process. It's a life process, right?
Mm,
Of sort of surrendering and what it really takes. And we can go deeper into the elements of the ego if you want. But one practical place I think people can start, or one thing that I think blocks people from surrendering and blocks people in their life are all the ways that we lie to ourselves. In many ways, as human beings, we lie to ourselves.
mm,
We don't tell the truth. We resist. We stay in relationships that we don't feel we're not in love. We work jobs that we hate. We betray ourselves, say yes when we mean no to get love, validation, and approval, and wonder why we feel
mm,
unhappy. And so I think that which often leads to pain, right? To me, pain is just feedback of life, feedback. Pain is feedback showing you where you're not in alignment with yourself. Pain is just feedback showing you where you're not living truth. And so I think if people can just start with the truth, what lies am I telling myself? Truly, just start there. It's not always easy, but like what am I lying to myself about? Wow,
mm,
I'm I'm not in love with my wife. What am I lying to myself about? I hate my job. What am I
mm,
lying to myself about? I have an alcohol problem. Okay, now I tell people you don't have to like take the pressure off of yourself having to take action, meaning you
mm,
don't have to take action because sometimes the fear of the consequence of taking action, oh shit, I'm going to have to break up. I'm going to have to leave my job. Oh no, it triggers the ego to then sort of kick in this self-protective mechanism, and the ego plays this game of confusion. I don't know, I'm not sure. When we know, we do know. And so if
mm.
we can take the pressure off of ourselves and just start by acknowledging the truth. You can't surrender, you can't let go, you can't change something if you're not acknowledging what is. And so just starting with, I'm not happy here. I'm not happy in my job. I'm not in love with my wife. Just beginning and starting with that can begin a process of feeling. And that starts an inner movement to the next phase. That starts an inner movement to something deeper. So I think if we can, there is no transformation and surrender without truth.
Oh
And so I would invite
yeah.
people to really just start there, like, what is the truth? And it sounds
Yeah.
easy, but it's not always easy. But if we could just start with the truth, like, I'm not happy. It's a bit scary because, oh shit,
Mm,
what does that mean? But if we can start there, to me, this is the beginning. It's an
mm.
opening.
Yeah, I love that. It's one of my favorite things to say. Only the truth sets you free, you know?
The truth sets you free.
Yeah.
It,
And
it, it might,
also,
It might piss you off at first, it might scare you, but it sets you free.
Exactly, because otherwise, I mean, really, we're living in resistance, right? What you resist
Yes.
persists. We have
Yes.
to accept what it is. It is
Yes.
what it is. That's how I feel. That's what
Yes.
I think.
But
That's
there is, I'm glad you like acceptance though is not surrender. And I want to
Mm.
clarify.
Can you
There is
elaborate?
yes, there is a difference between acceptance and surrender. So at first we're unconscious. We don't even know that we don't even know. That we don't even know
Mm.
that we're lying.
Yeah.
Then we start becoming aware and we start questioning, like maybe things aren't the way that they are. Maybe I'm not who I think I am. We start questioning. Then as we start questioning, because we're afraid of the consequence, we now start negotiating. Well, maybe I don't really have to give up those 14 donuts a week in order to get healthy. Maybe I don't have to leave my toxic relationship. And if I just change, maybe my husband, who is a alcoholic, maybe they'll change. So we start negotiating as a, again, way of resisting, right? So then we're in negotiation. Then there comes a moment that we realize no matter how much we negotiate with life, things aren't changing. This is a
Mm.
pivotal moment. So then we have to move into acceptance. It is what it is. Acceptance. My husband is the way he is. This is what he is. Let me not live in fantasy or denial. Life is, it is, I am what it is. This is the acceptance phase. Now, you can be in acceptance, but still be resisting. What do I mean? Like,
Mm.
well, it's freaking raining outside. Okay, I accept it's raining, but I'm pissed off that it's raining outside. It should, because I was looking forward to a nice weekend with my kids, and it's raining, damn it. And I won't go outside, but I'm a bit mad internally. So I'm not open. I'm not fully
Mm.
surrendered and participating with life. So you're in acceptance, but there's resistance there. There's something resisting. Now, surrender is the open-hearted participation with the process of life that is happening. It's like if it's raining outside, well, let's go dance in the rain. It's raining outside, so let's invite friends and have a barbecue. Let's invite friends and have a movie night at home, and let's make the best of this experience with an open heart. This is surrender, the open-hearted participation with the process of life that's happening. The phase in between acceptance and surrender, most people stop at acceptance. It is what it is. I'm a bit pissed off. I'm a bit mad. But in between, the phase is in the middle is grieving. Grieving
Mm.
is often the missed component when it comes to surrender. Grief is the doorway and the portal to true surrender, because surrender is a death. Surrender requires a letting go of who you thought you were. Surrender
Yeah,
requires a
true.
letting go of the life you thought you were going to live. Surrender requires a letting go of a phase of your life, a letting go of a dream, a letting go of what you thought was, a letting go of a story, an identity, a belief that we so held on to, a letting go of a phase of one's life. It is a letting go. And so when we truly can allow ourselves to grieve so that we can release and let an old aspect of ourselves die, a relationship, then that frees us up to truly now open our hearts to be available to the new possibility. I would ask everyone listening, what have you not allowed yourself to grieve fully? Because many of us unconsciously, our heart isn't fully open. As an example, we meet someone new. It's a great potential, but part of us isn't fully open to this new relationship. We're not excited about this new relationship because we still haven't fully let go of that person from 3 years ago. And a part of our
Mm.
heart is kind of stuck there. I had a friend, right? She came to me and she was getting married to the love of her life. And she was genuinely in love. And she's like, why do I feel sad? Why do I feel grief? Because she also had to acknowledge that as she was getting married, it was the end of her singleness. It was the end of an identity. It
Yeah.
was the end of a, and she thought something was wrong with her. So she wasn't allowing the grief, but in not allowing the grief, she wasn't able to like feel the joy of I've met my soulmate and I'm getting married. And so we have to allow ourselves to grieve, to grieve. Grief is the portal to true surrender. When we allow ourselves to grieve, then we can let go. And sometimes we don't allow ourselves to grieve fully because we're afraid that it's going to overwhelm us. We're afraid it's going to last forever. We're afraid it's never going to end. Sometimes we want to stay in a high positive, vibration. So let me not acknowledge the grief, but we just keep ourselves stuck.
No, thanks for sharing that. And how would you say to process grief? I mean, sit with the feeling, be with it, but what are some
I'm glad
tools
you
for
asked that. One way, like what I want people to know is that no feeling lasts forever. And sometimes we don't allow ourselves to feel the grief because we're afraid it's never going to end. And so sometimes we think, people tell me, but I have been grieving. But we don't realize that we've been thinking about our feeling and analyzing our grief, not necessarily feeling our grief. So back to the word you said, if you can allow yourself to be still, to slow down, take the label off of the feeling. Don't even call it grief. And just allow yourself to experience the grief as a sensation in your body. And notice the grief, not as grief, as a concept, but as a sensation in your body. And when you can just be with, surrender to, be with the sensation that we were calling grief in your body and just experience that fully, you will find you will almost find as though that grief happens in stages and layers, and you will begin to experience the grief, and a layer of that feeling will begin to dissolve. And maybe today a layer will dissolve as you're just fully with it and experiencing it. And you can notice what happens when you're just with it without trying to get rid of it, trying to move it, just being with it fully. A layer of the feeling dissolves. And then there'll be more lightness. And maybe you'll go through your day for a week or a few days and you'll be fine. And then maybe there'll be another layer of grief. So cultivating a relationship with the grief. But when you can be with it as a sensation in your body and just fully experience it without trying to understand it or resist it, that's when you move through it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's the biggest challenge for all of us, right? To stop judging ourselves, to actually cultivate self-love to ourselves. Because I know from myself, and I was listening to Gabby Bernstein this morning on her podcast, and she literally said the same thing. So I think I had to hear that myself.
Nice.
This like, just be with it, stop judging, because otherwise we resist it and then we perpetuate the grief,
resist
right?
it and it stays stuck. Yep.
Yeah. So it's about just being okay with that. It's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think I'm definitely inspired to read your book about surrender. There's so many nuggets of wisdom there. And I think you also had to share something about some upcoming events. How can people get in contact with you, work with you?
For sure. I've loved the interview. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, if you're listening and you've been inspired by today's interview, I have an amazing event coming up actually in July, in a few months. This is an event that I've done for the last 13 years. I've done 22 of these events. It's perhaps one of my most, if not my most powerful work up to date. It's called Boundless Bliss, the Bali Breakthrough Experience. If you're someone, maybe you feel as though you've been put on the planet for a purpose bigger than yourself, and you feel that you're really ready to heal, to release the layers of conditioning that block you. You're ready to connect with your power. You're ready to share your gifts with the world for real. Then I want to invite you to this experience. It's life-changing. I've taken everyone from billionaires, celebrities, entrepreneurs, visionaries, teachers, salespeople, everything and everyone, every cross-section of humanity, and it's been truly transformative. 12 days, an experiential emergence seminar training with me in Bali, where I create a process that is designed to help you peel away the layers of your conditioning. And you can find out more. It's www.boundlessblissbali.com. That's boundlessblissbali.com. Go to the website, watch the video. You can apply for an interview, and then we'll explore the possibilities to see if it's a right fit. But it's a truly life-changing event and one of my favorite things to do.
I love it. I have to say, from my own journey so far, the live events have the biggest transformation, and
Yeah.
especially with COVID behind us, we have been so much behind the screen. So I think personal connection is very,
Yes,
very
yes,
powerful.
yes.
Wonderful. And then, so you have the Magic of Surrender. What's the other book that you
Yeah,
have?
the magic of surrender book. The paperback's available on Amazon. My
Mm.
first book, my first baby book, is called "You Are the One."
I
It's
love
all
it.
about helping people find purpose and live a bold life. And so that's a really great book that people love as well. So check out those two books. You can find me on Instagram, just my name, Kute, Kute, Kute Blackson on Instagram. My podcast, Soul Talk, and also Facebook, Kute, Kute, Love Now.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm going to put everything in the show notes. And before I let you go, Cute, I would love to just ask you for one nugget of wisdom that you want to leave the listeners with. That's most profound for you.
You know, I would want you to remember that you are going to die. Feel your death. This is the nugget of wisdom. Meditate on your death. Feel your death. You're going to die. And if death came today, would you be ready? And if not, why not? What's unsaid? What's ungiven? What's unforgiven? We often think we're going to live forever, but the truth is, none of us know when that moment will come. When you meet your maker, whatever you believe, you can ask God for a refund on your life. God, can I get a refund on those 2 years that I wasted in that relationship that I knew wasn't right? No refunds in this game of life. So how would you need to live your life in such a way that if death came today, you could throw your arms up and say, I'm ready. There's nothing else. There's nothing left. And if you knew the date and the time of your death, would that change how you're living your life right now? And if it would, then I would say change it. How would you need to live with no regrets?
Yeah, thank you. I love that's a little bit provoking, I think, for all of us, but I think it's necessary,
Yeah.
because sometimes time is the most precious. We're always worried about money and money.
Tomorrow is
Like,
not a right.
yeah,
It's a privilege,
it is. Yeah.
Tomorrow is not a right. And so I say let's make the most of this human experience, because once it's gone,
Yeah. Let's make the best out of every day. So
Yeah.
true. Thank you for all of this, Kurt.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for your light, for all the wisdom, for your truth, for your
Thank
inspiration.
you.
And you listeners, as always, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your curiosity. And as always, I'm very happy to be with you all on the next episode. Bye, everyone.